It's 3 AM, what are you doing? 3 AM, exactly. The best time to work out? The time your muscles don't expect it. Muscle confusion, baby. The only thing confused here is you. Is training in the evening hours superior to morning hours for muscle hypertrophy? Some have suggested this based on various evidence. 3 long-term studies are commonly referenced. Kuzman and colleagues found 50% more muscle growth with evening, 4:30 to 8 PM, versus morning training, 6:30 to 10 AM. Another Saliak and colleagues study found higher percentages of muscle growth in an evening, 5 to 7 PM, versus morning training group, 7 to 9 AM. Finally, Shet found greater fat-free mass gains in bodybuilders who trained in the evening, after 6 PM, versus morning hours, before 10 AM. Besides these 3 long-term studies, mechanistic hypotheses are also put forth. The testosterone to cortisol ratio is higher in the evening, perhaps suggesting a more favourable hormonal environment for building muscle. Untrained individuals also tend to be stronger in the evening hours. This study found peak strength levels at 6 PM. Factors like greater hydration, glycogen stores, and higher core body temperature likely explain this greater evening strength. Collectively, all this mentioned data may have you believe evening training is definitively superior to morning training for hypertrophy. But I'm not truly convinced this conclusion can be made. Let's dive into why. Addressing the mechanistic data first. An elevated testosterone to cortisol ratio means little to nothing for hypertrophy in all likelihood. Alterations in various hormones within a normal healthy range likely do not mean much for hypertrophy. As for greater strength levels in the evening, notice how I said this was the case for untrained individuals. I made this distinction because if you train yourself consistently in the morning, guess what ends up happening? Your body adapts and you end up being comparably strong in the morning and evening hours. This is what a 2019 meta-analysis by Gurgic and colleagues, based on 7 studies, established. At this point, you may be thinking, okay, but what about the 3 long-term studies finding superior muscle growth with evening versus morning training? Starting with the Shet study that found greater fat-free mass gains in bodybuilders with evening after 6 PM versus morning workouts before 10 AM. This study was never actually peer-reviewed or published. This study can only be found detailed on a blog. As detailed in this blog, Shet presented the findings at a conference in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2005. This begs the question, why was the study never peer-reviewed and officially published? I have no idea, but because it wasn't, we simply cannot take this study as legitimate and real evidence. Progressing on, we noted a study by Saliak and colleagues finding higher muscle growth percentage gains with evening, 5 to 7 PM, versus morning training, 7 to 9 AM. Specifically, quadriceps volume increased by 3.5% for the evening group and 2.7% for the morning group. The issue is this 0.8% difference between groups was not statistically significant. What this means is we cannot say the 0.8% difference is a result of evening training being superior. Rather, it could just be random chance. For example, the evening group could just have had subjects with slightly better muscle building genetics. After all, there were only 9 subjects in the morning training group and 7 in the evening training group. As for the Kuzman study, which found 50% more muscle growth with evening versus morning training, it's worth briefly overviewing it to get a scope of its limitations. 42 previously untrained men were recruited and assigned into 1 of 4 groups. Group 1 trained in the morning hours, 6:30 to 10 AM, and lifted weights before performing cardio. Group 2 also trained in the morning hours, but they performed cardio before lifting weights. Group 3 trained in the evening hours, 4:30 to 8 p.m, lifting weights before performing cardio. Group 4 also trained in the evening hours, but performed cardio before lifting weights. The weight training consisted of a range of free weight and machine exercises, while the cardio was performed on a cycling machine. Training was performed 2 to 3 times per week. Before the study, at the 12th week, the midpoint of the study, and after the 24 weeks, vastus lateralis cross-sectional area at 50% of the thigh bone length was measured. This was an indicator of muscle growth. By the 12th week, the midpoint of the study, growth was similar between all 4 groups. However, by the 24th week, increases were greater for the 2 groups training in the evening than the 2 groups training in the morning. Perhaps this study indicates that in the longer term, beyond 12 weeks, training in the evening becomes more favorable for muscle hypertrophy. Yet, it's important to remember this is the only official published study to date finding a statistically significant effect of morning versus evening training. One study can never be definitive evidence. Let me use an example. This Kuzman study also found that after the 24 training weeks, increases in leg press 1 rep max were similar between all 4 of the training groups. As the groups differed in the order they performed weight training and cardio in a session, and all groups ultimately experienced similar 1 rep max gains, this study would have you believe that it does not matter if you perform weight training or cardio first in a session for strength. However, a meta-analysis by Edens and colleagues combined 9 other studies and found 4 increasing 1 rep max. Lifting weights first and then performing cardio in a session is better than the reverse of this. The point I'm making is future research could contradict the hypertrophy findings of this Kuzman study. Aside from the Celiac and Kuzman studies, 3 other studies have compared morning versus evening training for measures of muscle growth. These 3 studies lasted 12 weeks or less and found no statistical difference in muscle growth measurements between morning and evening training. When combining these 3 studies with the Celiac and Kuzman studies into a meta-analysis, which increases statistical power, as done by Gurgic and colleagues in 2019, there was no significant difference in muscle growth between training in the morning and evening. Now, again, the Kuzman and colleagues study was the only study lasting longer than 12 weeks, potentially indicating a benefit of evening training for hypertrophy long term, but we've already established why we should be cautious of findings from a mere single study. By no means am I definitively saying evening training is not superior to morning training for muscle growth. What I'm saying is the current data isn't convincing enough to say this. Future research is needed. For the time being, the majority of evidence indicates during 12 weeks or less, training in the morning is similar to the evenings for hypertrophy. Moreover, as for strength gains, Gurgic and colleagues found when averaging out strength tests performed in the morning and evening hours, there was no difference in gains between subjects that trained in the morning or evening hours. In other words, training in the morning or evening hours seems to produce similar magnitudes of strength gains. Ultimately, consistent training and adherence are paramount for making gains, so I think it's best to conclude individuals should train at a time that suits their schedule and life circumstances.